If you experience a pay gap, if you are making less than you have rightfully earned your life during your career, that money is less money that goes into your retirement because your income is less, and less money that goes into your Social Security benefits and all of those things.
Gloria Steinem once said, "We will never solve the feminization of power until we solve the masculinity of wealth." Barbara Provost and Maggie Nielsen are the team at Purse Strings that will help you navigate the ins and outs of financial independence so that you can be financially fearless. This is Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about.
Welcome to Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about. I am ecstatic to get into this episode today. Today we have Deb Vagins with Equal Pay Today. So with all of that, Deb, can you introduce who you are and what you do with the audience before we dive in?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. This is really exciting and fun and such an important issue. I'm so glad you're covering it. So yes, my name is Deb Vagins, and I am the National Campaign Director with an organization called Equal Rights Advocates. They're based in California, but they have folks around the country, including a crew of people in Washington, D.C., where I am. And the other hat that I wear for that organization is I'm the director of the Equal Pay Today Coalition. And that's a coalition of over 50 state, national, and tribal organizations that organize together all year long, working on economic justice issues and pay disparities, the wage gap, and organize around 9 equal pay days a year.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about these equal pay days and how they're into November. Every time we say that, people's jaw hits the floor and they're like, I just thought there was the one in March. And so we love to use this content to really share with our community about the disparity and just the attention we need to bring to it.
Yeah, technically they go into December, but because it's harder to organize people, some of them are moved earlier purely because we're trying to capture folks' attention.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time, and we educate on it all the time, because some people, they don't even know when we say, do you know what, equal pay day is? And some people know, not everybody. And it's interesting because we are really talking to a lot of financial professionals. And I always want to say, you need to know this because your women clients, they're not getting equal pay depending on what they're doing. And, it's about their culture, their background, their nationality. All of this comes into play, and you need to know about this. And the interesting thing was we pull up these dates every year, and Maggie and I could not find them for 2026. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if they lost funding.
No, well, there's a really good reason, which is we are about within the next few days about to announce the slate of days. They got delayed because of the government shutdown that was last year. So there was a delay in the data release. And then we work on the data, but we also organize with, 60, 70 groups who help us co-lead those days. And we want to make sure those are days that work for them. And, there's a lot of behind the scenes work to putting on those advocacy days. So I promise you, they're coming out shortly.
Well, I'm so glad to know these dates they're coming out, and I appreciate you and the work that you're doing there and all these other groups coming together, as I know it's no small feat, right? It's collecting the data is a lot of work in itself, but then to get all this advertised and coordinated is no small feat. So we appreciate the work that you're doing there. And I know you've been in the trenches of equal pay fights for decades. What's like a moment early on in your career that kind of lit the fire in you around this issue? Or did you just come out saying equal pay for everyone?
Well, I will say that there were some very, very formative years in my household where I saw the impact of economic disparities for my mom. And that was, my mom is probably one of the smartest people I've ever known. And to see how she was paid less purely because of her gender certainly was something that began those thoughts. And then I will say that I have also, once I started working, I have been incredibly fortunate to witness or work with 3 women earlier in my career on some of the most significant gender justice fights of the last 30 years. And their bravery still inspires me to this day. So Right after college, I was working at an organization called Emily's List, which raises money for pro-choice Democratic women running for Congress. And this was in the early 90s, and my boss was assisting Anita Hill during the Clarence Thomas Supreme Court nominations hearing. She was escorting her around the Hill, which gave me the opportunity to hear from her firsthand and see the impact of workplace harassment on the world stage and the impact that it had on her. That was incredibly informative and inspirational. And then later, that was one of the events that inspired me to go to law school to become a civil rights attorney. And then I became a litigator. And I was one of the first attorneys to work with a woman named Betty Dukes on what would become the largest employment discrimination case in history against Walmart. And so her courage to represent a class of 1.5 million women against one of the biggest employers in the country was awe-inspiring. And then I became that, civil rights lobbyist. I was at the ACLU, and I had the privilege of meeting and working with Lilly Ledbetter to help her enact the landmark pay discrimination legislation that bears her name, and remained close friends until she passed just a couple years ago. And looking back, what strikes me about these women is that they all faced workplace harassment, pay discrimination, and showed so much courage in coming forward. And this was all before Me Too lit the public consciousness. What they did paved the way for the conversations that we are all having now about workplace equality. And I was just lucky enough to be there for part of it.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm just kind of blown away with what you just said.
It also just brings me into this perspective of like, Deborah, you're not that old. And so like, how short is this history? You know what I mean? It's just like everything you're like, there's so many people we talk to who are like, it is all equal. It's been like this for years.
Oh,
it's like,
God.
No, it hasn't. I mean, you were saying that was in the late 90s, right?
I appreciate you saying that. I'm sure it's my Zoom filter.
You look fabulous.
I've been doing this work for a long time. But interestingly that you say that, there is a very short memory in the public consciousness. So let's take this story of Lilly Ledbetter, which frankly we passed that legislation in 2000, or enacted it in 2009. So for me, I still have pantyhose that old, or, I'm not wearing it anymore, but for a lot of people, that's almost a generation. People don't know the story. So it does seem very recent to me. But I will say, the Supreme Court had just told her that she needed to report pay discrimination when the employer started it. As working women, as working people, we know that employers don't really announce when they're beginning their discrimination. This was a ridiculous Supreme Court decision, disconnected from reality, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg sat on the bench, read her dissent out loud, which then was something that had not previously been done frequently, to show how she disagreed with this decision. And so from that point, what Ruth Bader Ginsburg said is that now it is in Congress's hands to fix this terrible decision. And there was a group of advocates who banded together. It was my organization and other nonprofit advocacy organizations around Washington, D.C., that banded together to write legislation, to launch a campaign to rectify how and when you can report discrimination and when you get your day in court and all that. But what was interesting is when we started that campaign, so it was a few years before, so 2007, people said, oh, equal pay for equal work. That was something that we fought and won in the early 60s with the Equal Pay Act or the Civil Rights Act of 1964. People didn't realize that at that point there still was a pay gap of over 20 cents per dollar on average. We sort of take for granted today that it's the kitchen table issue, but it wasn't in 2007. Really, people were like, why are you doing this? This was solved decades ago, and it's not. And what's great about that, what happened at that time, was now it's been 20 years, a little less than 20 years since then. And while we haven't solved the issue, and I know we're going to dig into some of that today, people recognize it as one of their top issues of working women. People understand that it's not solved and understand we need new tools. And so that does show you that there's sort of our work is not done.
No. And, I remember seeing this YouTube video. This was pre-pandemic, though. And it was all these, like Carol Burnett was on it and all these famous people. And they talked about it would be like 138 years before we saw pay equity. Do you remember seeing that or something like that?
I don't remember that exact video, but I do remember that messaging campaign. If you were to project out the gap using the way it's diminishing, that it would take 100 and, X number of years, changes each year for it to close. Well, the unfortunate thing is it's widened. It's gotten worse over the last 2 years. At that pace, it never closes. So obviously we continue the work, so that won't be the case.
So we talk a lot about in March, Equal Pay Day. Can you tell us, when did we start acknowledging Equal Pay Day? And really, it's nothing to be celebrated, really. It's just something to be educated on.
So, and actually, even though I started our discussion by saying that the Equal Pay Days have not been announced, I do want to announce that Equal Pay Day this year is March 26th. So we do have that date on the calendar, and the other other Equal Pay Days will be set shortly. So the National Committee for Pay Equity, which was a wonderful coalition that existed for decades, they were the first ones that set the Equal Pay Day. And over time, I had the privilege of collaborating with them. I was on their board and worked with them on helping set that first Equal Pay Day. And then the Paycheck Fairness Act Coalition, which was a coalition focused on legislation that we need to help close these gaps, worked with them to sort of take the mantle and start setting the Equal Pay Days. And now I work for Equal Rights Advocates and Equal Pay Today Coalition, and we've now picked up that baton and are running with it. And the way it originally worked was it was a day to mark, not celebrate, to mark how far women would have to work into a year to make as much as men worked the year before. And it was all women. Some people think it's just white women, but the Equal Pay Day is all women because it's so important to break out the different demographics, because some of the wage gaps are devastatingly low. As I mentioned, 9 Equal Pay Days that have been built out to recognize, to look at that disaggregation of data to show how bad it is for women. We no longer, generally looking at those 9 days, we don't usually use the catch-up date in the same way. It's around that time, but essentially these are all just to have a day on the calendar where we mark and are able to organize our communities around advocating for change, for the wage gaps that still exist. And the other thing that has changed in all those years, besides more days, is we used to use what we call full-time year-round data, which was looking at women who were working all year round full-time in the workforce. Well, that doesn't give the entire picture of what it's like for working women. We've got part-time, we've got part year, you've got migrant, you've got seasonal. And once you put all those women's hours into the mix, what we saw was, no surprise, the wage gap got even worse because women are segregated into lower paid, part-time, minimum wage, sub-minimum wage jobs. And once you started factoring those jobs into that overall number, then the pay gaps got worse. But it's important to have that data.
Let's take a quick pause to hear from this week's episode sponsor.
Divorce can shake your confidence, not just emotionally, but financially. And in those moments, you deserve guidance that brings clarity instead of fear. Hi, I'm Margarita Chang, Certified Financial Planner, Retirement Income Certified Professional, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and CEO of Blue Ocean Global Wealth. I help women going through divorce gain clarity, confidence, and control over their personal finances so they can make decisions that truly support their future. At Blue Ocean Global Wealth, we focus on financial planning first, because accessing competent ethical advice should not depend on the size of your investment portfolio. Every woman deserves to feel financially confident, empowered, and resilient, especially during a life transition as significant as divorce. Visit blueoceanglobalwealth.com to learn more about how financial planning can help you navigate divorce with greater clarity and peace of mind.
Now back to our show.
with women, it's very common that you see part-time, because we are juggling taking care of the kids and taking care of the families and all these different things. And so it's so important to bring in all of that data to get that holistic photo. And it's not like, oh, well, they're working part-time, so they're getting the same salary, just half of it. It's like, no, it's so much less than that. It's really docked pay.
Again, these numbers are an overall number, but what's really important to recognize is, and Equal Pay Today has a platform and a policy agenda that we're about to release at the end of March. We have one that we're just wrapping up right now. And in that, we describe our campaign platform, which is, it's not just equal pay for equal work. That's super important, but it's also about lack of pay transparency in the workplace. It's also about lack of paid leave. It's workplace harassment and over-concentration in minimum wage jobs. All of those things make the wage gap get bigger. So our campaigns are about, you asked me what is so important about this day. Well, we are marking the sort of the egregious, ongoing, and sometimes widening wage gaps. We're organizing communities to advocate for change, and we're making sure that we are making the invisible visible. And as I've sort of alluded to, what's been happening now is we've unfortunately erased nearly a decade of progress with the gap widening. The disparities for women of color are really catastrophic. And we are seeing, and I won't make assumptions about any politics of your listeners, but from the viewpoint of what I do for a living, we're seeing coordinated attacks on the civil rights agencies that enforce the laws that would help close the wage gap. And so that is something that we've been working a lot on as well.
Yeah, it's a big fight. I mean, it's a big fight, and the gap is widening. We're not narrowing it at all. And when we talk to financial advisors and financial professionals, it's so important for them to know this information because the population is aging. Women are going to age solo. So if they're making, less and they're not negotiating, which is another issue, women don't negotiate their pay or negotiate other benefits, it's compounding in the fact that we will always be behind. And as we age solo, live longer and age solo, who's going to take care of us? And so what are the strategies that financial professionals need to know the discrepancy here, that when they're talking to their women clients, and women are not a niche market, they are a market. They're 51% of the market, which we've been saying over and over and over again. They are the wealthiest market. They are coming into the largest wealth transfer in history. However, there is such a disparage between pay that if they don't understand this, how can they help them not save their money, but invest their money? Teach them about investing and compounding and the market and why this is so important to not just put your money in a bank account, but really understand how investing is going to help them have money for the long term when they're going to age solo. So it all starts here.
Yeah. And I would say that, one of the things, you're exactly right, is that one of the things that I suspect financial planners may not realize when talking to their female clients is that if you experience a pay gap, if you are making less than you have rightfully earned your life during your career, that money is less money that goes into your retirement because your income is less, and less money that goes into your Social Security benefits and all of those things. And so it has a lifelong impact that is beyond just the day-to-day, the investing, the having the good retirement. It's actually, what are the numbers for retirement? And then, those may be the lucky few that are being able to have conversations like that at all. What was also happening is when you look at numbers that are in the 50% to the dollar, right, for Native women, for NHPI women, then you're talking about a system that is not able to build generational wealth to be able to pass on money and even have those conversations. It's a huge impact on, as you said, 51% of the population or more.
So kind of now where we're navigating this time when rights, protection, and economic security all kind of feel shaky. At this moment, what do you want women to kind of understand about pay equity as a form of kind of safety and power?
Well, so for me, pay equity is a form of safety and power, and everything flows from economic stability, the ability to be housed, to be educated, to be healthy, to take care of elders, to take care of children. And economic independence is survival right now. So again, these are the value propositions of my organization. So, when we see that reproductive rights are under attack, or when workplace protections are being rolled back, when childcare costs more than rent in some cities, your paycheck is the thing that gives you options. And so it's incredibly important that women are, one of our pillars that says not only that you are being paid for what you have earned, rightfully what you've earned, but we're also want to make sure we're also fighting for women being in higher paid and better paid jobs, to decrease this segregation into the lowest paid jobs, to promote jobs that have paid leave. So you don't have to make a choice between taking care of your family or having a paycheck.
Okay, some of that is, I get it. And it's so hard though, because there's jobs like the teachers and the nurses where it's like, I need you to fix it, help the next generation. I need you to, be at the doctor's office. But people just have to go to jobs that pay more. And so it's this yin and this yang, because I want my kids to be educated and have good teachers, And so it's like, how do we even just get those positions to have more? Because we can't just have these people do different jobs and not have our teachers. And so it's always this back and forth, I feel like, because I totally understand going to a job that wants to pay more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, this isn't an easy fix. We've been fighting. There's been the employment and labor fight in America since the inception of America. And obviously we know that this is not a short-term fix, but ultimately the goal would be to have jobs of the type that you're talking about pay more, have better benefits, make sure that unionization is allowed, because that has demonstrated the wage gaps are smaller in unionized jobs, for example. So yes, of course, we need a diversity of jobs. We just hope that jobs will be better benefits, better pay, but also that you won't just happen to see the segregation. I'm being sarcastic. You won't see the segregation of women into the jobs that are lower paying, which is what the evidence shows right now.
So, first of all, what advice do you give to women at this point?
Well, I'm not a financial planner, but I am so glad that you guys are giving the advice that you are. What I try to do is I try to get people to advocate for change and to know their rights in the workplace. I think, unfortunately, what some of the data shows is that when women do negotiate, there's sometimes a backlash to them doing so. There's a lot of advice. Women need to negotiate and know their value, know their worth, and do that and negotiate. And I don't disagree. But the problem is if there is someone on the receiving end of that who does not know why that is so important. Sometimes we've seen a backlash that they are not hired, that they are considered, potentially a problematic employee because they're ascribing sort of gender roles and gender dynamics to asking for more money, which is incredibly unfair and puts us in a double bind.
Which so glad you also got out of there before you even got in there. But I get that you need a job as well. Again, it's good and bad, but it's thank you for showing your true colors before I'm full-fledged into the company.
Yeah, exactly. But some of the things that we do at Equal Pay Today is we organize around certain types of policy change, and folks can get involved, right? So one of the things that has been a real trend recently is what we generally call pay transparency laws. So that is urging employers to post salary ranges, right? Not groundbreaking, but it changes the power dynamic, right? So before you would have to kind of pull a number out of the air. You wouldn't know where you stood with other candidates. You wouldn't know what their budget was. You wouldn't know if you were lowballing yourself or highballing you wouldn't know. And so why put that on you? So what we have been fighting for is salary range postings that give employers the right to know pay ranges for the job that they're applying for. There are pieces of legislation that we organize around the Salary Transparency Act, and there are states that are working on this at the state law. And like I said, knowing this gives you a little bit more parameter if you are going to negotiate. And it seems completely fair. If it's $80,000 to $100,000, then you kind of know where you are, you know if you should apply for it, and you know what to say in your interview. So that's one thing. The other thing, again, something sort of small and common sense that people might not think about is How many times have you gone into an interview and someone has said, well, what did you make in your last job? So that they can presumably peg your new salary to your old salary. Well, there's several problems with that. One is if you are a woman or a worker of color, chances are your salary is less than it should be because you've experienced prior discrimination in an earlier job. And if it keeps getting pegged to that, you never break out of it. So even a high road employer, they may unwittingly be carrying that discrimination forward. So what we've advocated for is a ban on salary history questions. So what it means is that employer, and we know this, I've been a CEO myself, an employer has what they'll pay for a job, what their budget allows, what the salary ranges are of the other employees that are doing the same work. And if you're not, you should have that. And then you can make a proper offer based on the needs of the company and the experience of the person, and their prior salary history should not matter, especially when it's, bringing forward discrimination. And one of the many things we're advocating for, but a third one that I'll just throw out there is we're advocating for, as we've mentioned, paid family leave and paid sick and safe days. And so paid family leave, obviously that's when you take care of, illnesses of family, and a lot of people have to drop out of the workplace because they aren't being paid or they aren't being given the leave. And this way you don't have to choose between your family or a paycheck. And then sick and safe days. So it's amazing how many jobs where women are over-concentrated don't have those. So same thing, like for your health, we don't want people coming to work sick, and we don't want people to lose their jobs because they are. And then safe days is something that's happened recently, which is a great addition for folks that are recovering from or seeking help from domestic violence and abuse in priors that might not have been considered sick leave. But legislation is being passed so that people can also have protection for that type of necessary leave.
I haven't heard about that leave before, and I'm glad that's being talked about and instilled. And I can see a whole subset of people just saying, it doesn't happen that often where we need this kind of thing, but it does, and it needs to kind of just be talked about, and making sure, it's so hard living in a country where your healthcare is tied to your job. And so all these things go together. If you lose your job, you lose your healthcare, you lose this extra support. And I've read a lot of articles about how that's just such a big issue. And so it's tough, but I'm glad, getting that sick leave. Nobody wants to be with you at work when you're sick. I don't even care if you're working from home. Like, take care of yourself. You're not going to get better if you're not taking care of yourself. And same if you're not in a safe situation. You can't show up to work fully if you don't even feel secure.
My last job, I was the CEO of the National Network to End Domestic Violence. And part of abuse is often sabotage in jobs so that you lose your economic independence. And so that is the cycle that has been recognized as we work on legislation. And there's pending federal legislation, what's called the Family Act and the Healthy Families Act. Those are pending in Congress. There's also the Paycheck Fairness Act, which would deal with the ban on salary history. So all of those things I talked about. The reason I brought them up is there's legislation that is pending in Congress. People should call their members of Congress and say they want these protections. It helps everyone. And to your point, unfortunately, I do think there are a lot of women who suffer from domestic violence. But if an employer thinks, it's not that much, there's not much, then they can provide that leave if it's needed, right? It may not get used, but maybe it would.
Yeah, let's talk quickly about what actions women can take. I mean, I know you're doing all this great work. What can we do as listeners to support that, to help move it along as community members, to help you fight this good fight and to help all of us benefit?
Well, you can go to equalpaytoday.org. So it's with the number 2, equalpaytoday.org. And we will be releasing our policy platform. We have one now, so you could certainly go and check that out, the Equal Pay Today policy agenda. And we'll be releasing a new one at the end of March. And people should check out that list. It has the federal bills that would help on all of the things that we've talked about: workplace harassment, pay transparency, minimum wage, occupational segregation, paid leave. There's bills. You can call your member of Congress. We list the bills by name. You can call them. You can ask for them. We also identify some state bills as well, as things may be harder at the moment to get through Congress. There's still lots of progress being made at the state level, and people can look at the ones we have on our list and call their state legislators. And if your state is not on, you can also call your state legislator and talk about it and ask about it. You can write letters and say you care about these issues for your family, for your community, for other women, for other workers, and talk about it, right? You can organize, you can write letters to the editor to talk about it. If you happen to be a business owner or a small business owner, you can voluntarily do these things. You don't need legislation, right? You can look at your pay scales, make sure that there's nothing that's popping out based on race or gender. You can stop asking salary history questions now. You can put up the postings for your pay ranges and job announcements now.
We're going to put all this in the show notes. I mean, making phone calls, I mean, it's the least we could do. And we're always about, supporting as best we can women in business, women in general. So it's so important that you're sharing this information that we can put in the show notes and women can pick up the phone and start having these conversations, because there's no time like the present, right? I mean, there's so much pushback against women today, and we need to start standing up and hearing our voices and just being loud about it.
Absolutely. And you can also go to our action page, and you can also send emails too, if that's easier for you.
Wonderful.
Deb, there's a question we like to ask everybody on our show. And so you've shaped policy and lived the consequences of gender pay gaps. So for you, what is your definition of financial freedom?
Well, for me, financial freedom is the ability to make choices based on what's right for you and your family, not based on what you can barely afford. It's power, it's safety, it's dignity, and it's options that often others may be able to take for granted. Financial freedom is about not having to choose between your career and your health or your family's health.
Powerful, yeah. Well, we can't thank you enough for just being with us today, sharing all this amazing information, for the work that you do and you've continued to do. Thank you so much for that. It's, sometimes our hard work goes unnoticed, but we see you, we thank you, we congratulate you, and we'll be watching you and supporting you as well.
Well, thank you so much. Your show is so important, and I mean, this is the stuff that really makes a difference, honestly. Like, sometimes I can send out an email, but I may not be being able to reach in the way that you can reach people. So I'm very grateful to be here and very grateful to you.
Yeah, thank you for this time. I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this episode. So thank you, Deborah. And until next time, be financially fearless. You've been listening to Women and Money, the shit we don't talk about. Now it's time to take what you've learned and make bold moves towards financial independence. Stay in the know by joining our newsletter for exclusive tools, resources, and updates that keep you financially fearless. Head to pursestrings.co and sign up today. Need a financial professional who gets it? Turn to PurseStrings' curated directory, your go-to resource for financial experts who know how to put you first. Love this episode? Leave us a review and help us empower even more women to own their financial power. Until next time, be financially fearless.